Games, games, games. What do these games have in common? Well, they were all made by teams of at least 2 developers for Collab Jam 2026. But they have a more important similarity. None of these games contain any words. The winner of the jam, Button Box, was a strange little incremental with a charming audio-visual style and one hell of a twist in its tail. Some entries played it quite safe with the restriction, like Intergalactic Rocket Ball, Bina and Sky Island Tours, all movement-based games which were so immediately self-explanatory that it didn't really matter that there wasn't any text. Others really played around with the brief. In Parahelion, players use the gravitational pull of celestial bodies to guide an object through space, whereas Shop in Silence was a game about interpreting minds, which makes excellent use of its illustrator's skill at drawing characters in various charming poses. Interdimensional Elevator Operator was a game where the interface itself was a puzzle to solve, and Watkey took a similar concept in a much more frantic and noisy direction. That's right, devs weren't allowed to explain anything in their game using text. This was a brief I set because I felt it would help devs to practice some of the skills which so many of us tend to be quite bad at. Visual communication, intuitive interfaces, and not getting too bogged down in dialogue or progression systems in a jam game which people are only going to play for 3 minutes most of the time. Here's one of the developers of Spellwright to discuss what he learned working in a husband and wife team for the 14-day jam.
This is Nate, one of the developers of Spellwright: The Last Rites. Collab Jam was my first ever game jam, so I learned a ton. The main goal for my wife and I was a diegetic UI that communicated core functions like mana, play, restart, but using the wizard's own stationery. I think one of the biggest takeaways was how clear game elements need to be, especially in UI. Just carving a play button into the skull wasn't enough. I had to make it glow and float and shake. What I assumed was pretty obvious was frequently overlooked. Luckily, I had 2 patient playtesters that allowed me to push a build, test, and then quickly tweak those settings and then test again. This quick cyclical testing took about 2 hours, but it made for a more engaging game.
Hi, I'm Garry and I was one of the developers for Distraction Therapy. I've been trying to make a game for a year, very much struggling with communicating what the players need to do. So doing this jam really helped me focus on what is evident when you see the game so that I can think of what to show and when to show it.
Often, game jams have some sort of loose theme which you're meant to incorporate, like limited space or a roll of a dice. These can be fun, but they tend to encourage people to focus too much on having the most unique and unusual interpretation of the theme rather than using the jam to hone the skills that they most need to practice. I really wanted this to be a jam where people were set up to genuinely learn something about how to be better designers and developers. A lot of people think of learning purely as instruction, finding instructions and following them. But there's a difference between instruction and education, and there are things you really can't learn through direct instruction. An instructor tells you how to do something, whereas an educator is someone who sets up scenarios which hopefully enable you to discover things for yourself and to discover things about yourself too.
Hello, I'm Robbobin. I worked on Intergalactic Rocket Ball with the Chief. The main thing that I learnt was to get out of my own head. I think there's so much pressure in commercial projects and in game jams to make something really novel, like some combination of mechanics no one's ever seen before. But the reality is, I think for my skill set at least, it's kind of better to just focus on something with a proven formula that we know works if it's executed on well. And then that means we can spend all that time that I always spend just dithering and agonizing over some brand new mechanic, just making something polished and playtesting the crap out of it, and I really value that approach now. in a way that I didn't necessarily before.
Now, if someone were to ask you, what's the point in game jams? Can you learn anything from it? You probably focus on talking about the skills you learn from doing your own projects. It's normal to use a jam as a way of quickly testing new ideas, practicing some sort of artistic or technical aspect of game development. That's what most people are aiming to do when they join a game jam. But when everyone is really committed to playing as many of the other games as possible, something else happens too. One of my absolute favourite outcomes of the jam wasn't any specific game, but this number. Over 4,000 playtests happened between developers. 4,000! That's an average of 40 playtests conducted per team, and I think there's something really helpful about struggling with a particular set of design problems and then going and sitting down and seeing how a bunch of other people dealt with the same issues. Everyone who entered the jam was eligible to vote and judge each other's games using a system of prompts which were intended to make them think about the games just like real players would. No points for effort or judging the idea more than the execution of the idea, just looking at what was in front of them on the screen and voting based on whether different parts of the game were appealing, intuitive, or exciting to them. Now, being a good game designer isn't being an ideas guy. Of course, it involves making games. But in order to learn what works, you also need to play and analyze existing games. And when the only games you play are big, polished, finished games, you don't have reference points which are closer to the size and scope of the games that you are probably making. Sitting down with dozens of other developers' games and thinking through what worked and what didn't, and how you might have approached things differently yourself if that was your game, that's a kind of learning experience you can't get from being told what to do via a video tutorial. Now, here are the devs of Spellwright and Intergalactic Rocket Ball back again, this time to discuss what they learnt from playing one of the other developers' games.
One game from another jammer that I found to be a shining example of everything that we wanted to do with Spellwright was Sonar Mining Co. The game had a really simple loop of collecting gold blocks to purchase upgrades that helped you collect more gold blocks. But really what elevated it was its sound design and UI. There were little details like the excess resources spilling out of storage, or the console having a really heavy flip between play mode and purchase mode that was super immersive.
Masterclass in kind of how you can put friction in front of the player and then remove it as a kind of reward, which isn't necessarily something that we've not seen before, but the kind of extra ingredient here is that it had an incredible vibe and a kind of fully skeuomorphic interface. All of this friction that you're putting in front of the player to just move their little craft around, it feels really earned in a way that it doesn't if it was just like a kind of menu interface-based game.
I think it made me realize that engagement in games is both a push and a pull. Like flashy effects or level ups, achievements, those sorts of things, they push through the screen. But Sonar Mining Co. it pulled. Like the weight of the submarine console and the deep sounds, the satisfying clinks of resources. It was a subtler, immersive experience that was super impressive.
Another theme which came up in a lot of our discussions after the jam was the tension between wanting to have a standout, unique idea versus settling for something more commonplace and then focusing on executing it as well as possible.
Hi, I'm Tom, or Cheese on Cheese. I worked with my friend Jared on a game called Little Guys, a game where rather than you crafting ingredients, what if the little ingredients are alive? So we put legs on sticks and rocks. We focused on making the interactions very clear by having your cursor as a visible hand. We tried to limit the interactions where you could pick them up and bash them into other objects. Tried to stay away from a lot of complex UI behaviors and things that we'd have to teach the player. Where we went a little off the rails is we lost sight of what makes a game concept clear. What is a clear goal for the players to do? How do you make that super self-explanatory?
Today's video is brought to you by my sponsor, you. Well, some of you anyway. This channel is Patreon funded, and that means that there are a group of you that have chosen to get behind this and support it by giving us some money every month so that I can keep this channel running. That support means that I can follow the topics that I think are interesting or useful and not necessarily have to chase trends to please the algorithm, to get ad revenue or make sponsors happy or anything like that. So thank you to everyone who supports this channel. Wouldn't be able to do stuff like this game jam without you. And if you head over to patreon.com/Indie Game Clinic now, you can check out what's on there in terms of rewards. There's early access to videos like this before they're put out on YouTube and without ads like this. There's behind the scenes essays and notes from the podcasts. You also get access to our Discord, which is a place to share your work in progress games, get feedback on them, get priority place in the playtesting streams I run regularly, and just generally hang out with other people that want to make great games and want to help each other out. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, pop over at the end of this video. Okay, back to the video.
Patreon.com/Indie Game Clinic.
Hey there, my name's Jay. I wrote the music and did the audio design on Bin Run, a trash collection game with dynamic music that slowly layers on the more trash you gather. And today I wanted to talk about the game Day in the Woods, a trash collection game with dynamic music that slowly layers on the more trash you gather. But before I do, I'll talk about my own game a bit. When my team first settled on the concept for Bin Run, I had this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that it wasn't interesting or unique enough for a game jam, that people wouldn't find it appealing. But based on our prototype, it seemed like it could be fun and would be pretty easy to throw together in the allotted time.
The second the first piece of garbage goes in the truck, the music kicks up, I get points, and it's just instantly clear from the start.
I could tell it had some potential, but even as the game began to take shape and continued to prove promising, the concern didn't go away. It wasn't until after we submitted the game and we started receiving a good amount of positive feedback that I realized these concerns were shallow. What matters, above all else, is whether the game is fun.
It had my brain worrying about, could this be a friend slop game that I play with others? What kind of trash am I going to pick up? Is there going to be a junkyard dog or something? So what really resonated with me was that the player fantasy was self-explanatory, and it just serves as a great foundation for more game afterwards from a very simple start. So great job, Bin Run Jam team.
So anyway, Day in the Woods. I really enjoyed this game. It's very tightly designed, and it makes itself intuitive through the use of a lot of clever little details that one might miss if they aren't paying close attention. But obviously the main thing that caught my eye was that there were a few similarities to our own game. What this taught me, as someone who can at times be a little precious about their own ideas, is that similarities are okay. Different teams with different personalities and backgrounds working on comparable ideas never really land on the same end product. And that's exactly what happened here. Our game turned out to be fast-paced and chaotic, trying to collect as much trash as you can before the level ends, and then moving on to the next. Whereas Day in the Woods was a more narrative experience, a casual, pleasant stroll through a forest with a lot of love put into the details and a funny, if kinda sad, ending.
I played every single game that was submitted for this jam, and I streamed most of those sessions too. I was super impressed by the games people made, but even more impressed by the community spirit which went into all of those playtests and votes and pieces of thoughtful feedback. I'm so pleased with what everyone achieved here, and I hope you keep making great games together.